Welcome to the channel. We are grateful to have you joining this peaceful space. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe, activate the bell icon, and leave a gentle comment with your thoughts or requests for future stories. Now, settle in, relax your shoulders, and let the soothing rhythm of this journey carry you toward a peaceful night's sleep. A soft dusk settles over an imagined landscape, and you find yourself standing at the border of a vast, quiet library. The air is still, touched only by the occasional sigh of wind moving between ancient stone columns. Ahead, a warm glow invites you forward, offering a gentle beginning to the journey through the early levels of philosophy. A slow awakening, not of urgency, but of quiet curiosity. Nothing calls you here, yet everything seems to welcome you. The doors open without effort, as though they have been waiting for your arrival. Inside, the first hall is spacious and dimly illuminated, lined with shelves that curve like waves into the distance. Each shelf holds objects rather than books, simple, familiar things from everyday life. A cup, a key, a stone, each resting in silence under a small lamp. These ordinary items seem strangely significant here, as though they are clues to questions you have not yet articulated. This is the entrance to Level 1, a place where gentle questions begin to drift into awareness. No debates, no arguments, just the soft stirring of wonder. You walk slowly down the first aisle. A polished stone catches your eye. It looks smooth from a distance, but as you draw near, you notice tiny imperfections across its surface. Flecks of mineral, thin lines, faint ridges. You pick it up, turn it in your hand, and feel the texture shift under your fingers. How many times have you seen a stone without truly seeing it? How often do we pass through the world without noticing the details that shape our experience? In this quiet moment, you sense something changing. Philosophy begins not with answers, but with noticing. As you continue, the lights dim slightly, encouraging focus. One of the shelves holds a small mirror. When you look at it, the glass reflects your face, but somehow feels unfamiliar, as though the reflection belongs to someone thinking their very first thought. The mirror blurs faintly, and for a moment, you wonder whether it is your eyes or the world that is shifting. A calm insight drifts forward. Sometimes the most ordinary perceptions are less stable than they appear. The hall seems to whisper that there is a difference between seeing and understanding. Toward the end of the aisle, you find a delicate feather resting on a pedestal. A soft breeze stirs, and the feather trembles. You watch how the movement ripples through the air, how something small can reshape the space around it. A quiet image comes to mind. Distant storms forming from subtle beginnings, paths of life shaped by unnoticed moments, futures unfolding from faint motions of thought or chance. Without naming the idea, you can feel its presence, the notion that even tiny changes may carry influence far beyond themselves. Level 1 ends not with certainty, but with a recognition that the world is more intricate than it first appears. A gentle archway leads you into Level 2, where the hall becomes narrower, more focused, like a corridor guiding your attention inward. Here, the lighting softens further, creating pockets of shadow that make each shape more mysterious. You walk slowly, sensing that the questions here deepen. They are not meant to unsettle you, but to invite you to dissolve assumptions as easily as breath dissolves into the air. On a small table sits a wooden stick, partially placed inside a bowl of clear water. You notice immediately that the stick appears to bend where it meets the surface, though logic assures you it is straight. You lift it, and indeed, it is unbroken. You return it to the water, and once again, the image bends. The scene teaches not through explanation, but through experience. Perception and reality can diverge, and the senses, though precious, sometimes veil as much as they reveal. The realization comes without tension. It arrives as a soft exhale, as though the hall itself wants you to rest comfortably in uncertainty. Further along, a faint hum echoes. You find a lantern hanging from an overhead beam, its flame shielded by glass, etched with a swirling pattern. When the flame flickers, the shadows on the floor twist and reshape themselves. For a moment, it appears as though the room is shifting in response to your presence. Yet when the flame steadies, the patterns return to stillness. You understand now, quietly, that the mind constructs meaning from shifting appearances, weaving stability from change. Reality may be firm or fluid, but experience often lies between the two. At the next alcove, a stone doorway leads into a smaller chamber. Inside sits a single chair facing a blank wall. You sit. The emptiness of the wall feels intentional, a space where imagination rises gently to the surface. As you focus, faint shapes begin to drift across your awareness. A room inside a room, a figure inside a story, a person following rules without knowing the language behind them. These images drift around you like pieces of a dream, offering a quiet insight. Understanding is not merely about processing information, but about grasping meaning. You sense there is a difference between acting as though you understand and truly knowing. You rise and leave the chamber. Ahead, another pedestal awaits, topped with a simple mask, smooth, expressionless, split into light on one side and shadow on the other. When you hold it, you feel the subtle weight of the choices we make about what to see, what to assume, and what to believe. The mask is neither deceptive nor truthful. It merely invites the question: how much of what we accept as real is shaped by perspective? The corridor opens into a gentle circular room where level 2 quietly concludes. A low table holds an unlit candle beside a small matchbox. You strike a match, watching how the flame blooms into being. The room brightens just slightly. You place the flame against the candle, and a slow, steady glow grows from the wick. The light settles the atmosphere, as though illuminating not certainty, but calm awareness. You sit for a while in the soft light, watching the candle flame sway almost imperceptibly. With each quiet movement, the shadows on the round walls expand and contract like a slow breath. You notice how easily the mind begins to treat these shadows as patterns and shapes, as if they were telling a story of their own. A simple flame, a simple wall, and yet the mind cannot resist filling the space with meaning. It is here, in this uncomplicated room, that level 2 gently continues, inviting you to observe not the world itself, but the way you meet it. As you rest your gaze on the wall, you imagine a group of people who have never seen anything beyond a chamber like this. For them, the shadows would not be symbols or hints. They would be the whole of reality. The idea drifts through you slowly, without urgency. How much of what you take for granted might be only a shadow of something else, just as partial and incomplete. The question does not demand an answer. It only asks to be held like a smooth stone in the palm of your attention, turned gently, felt from different sides. You close your eyes for a moment and notice how the mind continues to project pictures even in darkness. Memories, possibilities, echoes of things you have seen or imagined appear and dissolve. In this inner theater, entire worlds rise and fade without a single step being taken. It becomes clear in a soft and tranquil way that experience is not merely what surrounds you, but also what arises within you. The line between outer and inner becomes less rigid, more like a quiet shoreline where waves of perception come and go. When you open your eyes again, the candle is still there, unwavering. You stand and walk along the circular wall. On one side of the room, you find a low shelf holding a series of small, closed boxes. Each box is identical on the outside, made of the same pale wood, fitted with the same simple latch. Yet a neat label rests in front of each one, displaying a single word: sound, color, warmth, memory, thought. The labels suggest what might be inside, but the boxes remain closed, silent and patient. You lift the box labeled sound. It feels no different from the others, neither heavier nor lighter. You do not open it. Instead, you simply hold it, acknowledging that sound, like all experiences, arrives as something given yet interpreted. The box could hold anything at all, just as a moment could carry any number of meanings. The same event might feel comforting on one evening and unsettling on another, depending on the quiet weather of the mind. You return the box to its place and trace a hand lightly along the edge of the shelf. No guardian appears to tell you what to believe. No voice insists that one interpretation is the only correct one. There is only the steady hum of your own awareness, the feeling that perception is both a gift and a gentle puzzle. You move on, not to solve it, but to live alongside it peacefully. The floor beneath your feet is smooth and cool, guiding you toward a narrow doorway framed by simple stone. Above the doorway, an inscription has been carved in small, careful letters. You have to lean in slightly to read it. It says that what you see is only one way of viewing things, and that every path through the world is lit by the lamp of a particular perspective. The message does not ask you to reject your senses. It simply reminds you to hold them lightly, the way one holds a fragile lantern in the dark. You pass through the doorway and find yourself back in the broader hall that connects all the levels. The library stretches quietly in both directions, its shelves winding away into the distance like rivers of thought. Behind you lies the first chamber of questions, where you have learned to notice details and to recognize the subtle distance between appearance and reality. Ahead of you lie deeper rooms where questions will grow more intricate, yet never hostile. This place does not rush you. It will wait as long as you need. You pause at the threshold, letting the stillness settle in your body. You notice the weight of your feet on the ground, the steadiness of your breathing, the gentle rhythm of inhaling and exhaling. Everything you have just seen and felt, stones, mirrors, water, light, boxes with labels, begins to weave itself into a quiet understanding. You do not need to summarize it or name it. It is enough to know that you have taken the first steps. Somewhere far above the vaulted ceiling, the sky has grown darker, but inside the library, the light remains warm and constant. You sense that level 1 and level 2 are now complete, not in the sense of finished tasks, but as foundations laid patiently, layer upon layer. You have begun to see how easily the mind accepts shadows as solid things, how naturally it fills gaps with stories, and how gently it can be invited to question itself without fear. Before moving on, you allow yourself one last glance back toward the candlelit room. Although you are no longer inside it, the image of the small flame stays with you. Wherever you walk next, that steady, quiet light will follow, not as an answer, but as a reminder. You are capable of noticing, of pausing, of wondering. With that awareness resting calmly in the background of your mind, you turn toward the next corridor, ready to drift onward to higher levels at a pace as unhurried as sleep itself. And as you take the first slow step, it feels less like a decision and more like floating, carried gently forward by curiosity, wrapped in quiet, and perfectly free to rest whenever you wish. A gentle quiet settles as you step into the next corridor of the library. The shift is subtle, yet unmistakable. The air feels stiller here, as though this region has been waiting longer, accumulating silence like dust on untouched shelves. The lamps along the walls glow with a muted gold, their light softer than before, guiding you toward the deeper rooms where the nature of identity unfolds in quiet, contemplative layers. The hallway opens into a wide chamber shaped like an oval, its ceiling a smooth arch of pale stone. In the center stands a long wooden table, illuminated by a single overhead lantern. Resting on the table is an object you immediately recognize, but also feel compelled to examine. A simple wooden boat model. Its planks have been worn by time, their edges rounded, their grain softened. The model seems old enough to carry a story, though no text accompanies it. You walk closer. The boat is divided into sections, each plank marked with a tiny inscription indicating a number. The arrangement suggests that these pieces have been replaced many times. Some appear freshly cut, others look as ancient as driftwood. You imagine workers repairing a vessel that has sailed across countless tides, replacing its parts little by little until none of the original pieces remain. Yet when you look at the boat as a whole, it feels like the same vessel. It holds continuity the way a melody does, not through identical notes, but through a pattern that endures. As you observe the model, a mural on the wall behind it begins to draw your attention. It depicts two boats, one made of old, weathered planks, and another composed of new, polished timber. For a moment, the two images seem to overlap, as though you are meant to notice their resemblance. You understand that level 3 begins with a quiet examination of change, how parts shift while something deeper feels preserved. The idea is not presented as a puzzle to solve, but as a gentle recognition. Things transform, yet somehow remain themselves. You move along the chamber's edge and notice a set of mirrors arranged in a curved line. Each mirror reflects you from a slightly different angle. In one, your posture appears a bit straighter. In another, the light softens your features. You study the reflections without judgment, noticing how each image feels both familiar and subtly distant. Identity, the room seems to whisper, is not a fixed point, but a constellation of perspectives shaped by moments, choices, and memory. A small alcove opens to your right. Inside, on a stone pedestal, rests a cluster of smooth river stones. They appear identical, their surfaces polished to the same gray sheen. You pick up one stone and then another, feeling how indistinguishable they are in your hand. You realize that if there is no feature that separates one from the next, any distinction you make between them exists only because your mind creates it. This quiet moment carries a simple suggestion. Identity may rely as much on difference as on presence. You set the stones back on the pedestal and step out of the alcove. The chamber leads you into another hallway, narrower than the previous one. The lighting becomes more subdued, and the walls are lined with shelves, holding old notebooks and fragments of sketches. Many pages are filled with diagrams of branching lines, as though someone was trying to map the structure of thought itself. Ahead, a door stands slightly open. You push it gently and enter a modest study lit by a lamp standing near a window. The room feels warm, inviting, as though someone has just stepped out and will return shortly. On the desk lies an open notebook filled with notes written in soft, neat handwriting. You cannot read the words clearly from where you stand, but the shapes of the sentences seem to trace the flow of associations, ideas linking to other ideas, thoughts branching out like roots through soil. Near the notebook, a pair of spectacles rests atop a stack of blank pages. You pick them up and notice that they are heavier than you expected. Through the lenses, the room shifts slightly, its outlines more defined. It feels as though the spectacles sharpen not only the view but also the awareness behind the view. You set them down gently, recognizing that tools shape attention and attention shapes experience. On another table sits an object that resembles a folded map, though upon closer inspection, it contains no geographical markings. Instead, it displays patterns of connections, lines looping from one symbol to another, forming intricate shapes like constellations drawn from memory. The more you look, the more the map appears to represent thoughts that extend beyond the mind, reaching outward into the environment. You sense that level 3 has begun to transition into level 4, where the boundary between self and world becomes more fluid. You walk toward the window. The glass is slightly fogged, and when you place your hand against it, the warmth from your skin leaves a soft imprint. Through the window, you see the faint outline of a courtyard filled with gentle lamplight. The trees there sway slowly in the breeze, their branches moving in unison like a single organism. The scene encourages a reflection that arrives with the ease of breath. Perhaps the mind is not confined to the body, but stretches outward, engaging with spaces and objects that become extensions of thinking. Behind you, the lamp on the desk flickers. Its dim glow spreads across the room in a way that feels almost conscious. You realize that everything around you, spectacles, notebooks, maps, shadows, participates in shaping your experience. They are not separate from thought. They become part of the quiet machinery that carries it forward. The study's door remains open behind you, waiting for you to return to the hallway. You give the room one last lingering glance, appreciating its stillness, before stepping out once more into the emerging path of level 4. The lamps along the corridor brighten slightly, as if acknowledging your progress. The boundary between inner reflection and outer environment softens, guiding you onward with gentle ease. As you follow the corridor further into the quiet depths of the library, the atmosphere grows gentler, as though the space itself is encouraging you to slow down. Level 4 opens ahead like a soft breath, marked by a circular arch carved with faint patterns resembling threads weaving in and out of each other. The patterns seem to shift slightly in the lamplight, giving the impression that identity is not a fixed outline, but an evolving tapestry. Beyond the arch lies a room filled with tall shelves, arranged in concentric rings. Each shelf holds objects that appear ordinary at first: scarves, gloves, small journals, empty picture frames. Yet as you approach them, you notice subtle traces of use: a crease along the spine of a journal, a thread pulled loose from the edge of a scarf, the faint imprint of fingers on a picture frame. Each item seems to carry the memory of a moment, suggesting that identity is shaped not only by the parts that compose us, but by the experiences that pass through us. You pick up one of the scarves. It is soft and lightweight, holding a gentle warmth as if it had recently been worn. When you lift it, the fabric moves smoothly in the air, folding and unfolding in ways that feel familiar. For a moment, you sense how objects often become extensions of the people who use them. How a scarf can carry the feel of a body, and how tools, habits, or patterns of thought become part of the mind's own reach into the world. You set the scarf back, feeling a calm appreciation for the subtle ways identity expands beyond skin and memory. At the center of the room, a round table supports a set of wooden blocks shaped into a tall, narrow tower. The blocks vary in size, each carved with delicate lines. You gently touch the lowest block and feel its sturdiness. When your hand moves upward, the blocks give slightly under your fingers, revealing how each depends on the stability of those beneath it. The tower seems to suggest that the self is built through layers, experiences, choices, influences, none identical, yet all supporting what stands above them. You lift one of the middle blocks. It slides out smoothly, leaving a gap that causes the tower to lean. You hold the block for a moment, noticing how far the structure tilts without falling. Then, carefully, you return it to its place, aligning the tower once again. In the quiet of this movement, a soft realization forms. Even when pieces shift or are temporarily removed, the whole can remain steady. Identity, too, bends without breaking, adjusting to the changes that time brings. A gentle pathway leads out of the tower room into a smaller chamber illuminated by a single hanging lamp. The light in this chamber is warmer, creating a soft glow around the objects placed neatly along the walls. Here you find simple tools: a quill, a compass, a pair of gloves worn smooth by thoughtful use. Each tool feels like a relic of someone who once relied on it to carry out their intentions. The room suggests that identity expresses itself through action as much as through thought, that the self extends into the things one chooses to do, shape, or create. In one corner stands a wooden mannequin, its limbs joined with loose hinges. It is neither ornate nor lifelike, but its posture conveys a subtle openness, as if waiting to be moved. You raise one of its arms gently, and the movement causes a soft creak in the joints. The mannequin stays in its new position, echoing the idea that every action leaves a trace. You step back and observe it for a moment, sensing how even simple gestures contribute to the patterns that form the self. On a small pedestal nearby rests an open journal. Its pages are blank except for a faint, hand-drawn outline. The outline resembles a branching path, with lines extending outward like roots or rivers. You run your fingers lightly over the page, and although the ink is perfectly dry, the lines feel slightly raised. The drawing seems to represent choices and their consequences, the many directions a life can take. Yet the branches do not depict outcomes. They simply show possibilities, each one part of a broader whole. A gentle breeze drifts into the room from a narrow window near the ceiling, carrying the faint scent of wood and distant night air. You look upward and notice that a few leaves have gathered on the windowsill. They flutter slightly, reminding you that even in still spaces, movement continues. Identity, the room suggests, is not something fixed once and for all, but an ongoing process shaped by constant interaction with the world. You step back into the corridor, where the light brightens just enough to guide you forward. As you walk, the features of Level 3 and Level 4 begin to weave together: change and continuity, parts and wholes, inner thoughts and outer tools. These ideas blend quietly into a deeper understanding. The self is not a single point, but a living pattern shaped by time, presence, and connection. Ahead, The hallway opens into a gentle curve that leads toward the next stage of your journey. The air grows a little cooler, the lamps a little dimmer, offering a peaceful transition. You let the last reflections of these levels settle softly in your mind, as though placing a bookmark in a favorite chapter. Nothing is rushed here. Every step unfolds slowly, with the soothing rhythm of breath and thought moving in harmony. You take one more step, feeling the calm awareness that level 3 and level 4 are now complete. The path through the library continues onward, steady and welcoming, inviting you to explore the deeper halls where time and the universe begin to open like quiet constellations. A gentle hush wraps around you as you leave the chambers of identity behind. The hallway ahead bends slowly, leading you toward a new region of the library where the very structure of time seems to soften. The lamps along the walls are spaced farther apart here, and the shadows between them are longer, like stretches of night folded carefully between moments of light. You sense that you are entering a place where the hours themselves are treated as objects to be observed and quietly understood. An archway appears ahead, marked with a simple symbol, a circle crossed by a thin, straight line. As you pass beneath it, the atmosphere shifts in a subtle, soothing way. The air feels cooler, calmer, as though the library has slowed its breathing. You have arrived at level 5, where time is not a rushing river, but a still lake, inviting you to gaze into its surface and watch reflections form and dissolve at their own unhurried pace. The room beyond the arch is wide and almost entirely empty. In the center stands a single stone column supporting a clear glass sphere about the size of your hands held together. Inside the sphere, tiny points of light glow faintly, drifting in slow, graceful patterns. Some lights move upward, others downward, some in gentle circles. Yet the sphere itself remains motionless. It feels less like a clock and more like a quiet model of time itself, where every moment exists within the same tranquil space. You approach the column and rest your fingertips lightly against its cool surface. As you watch the lights, a calm realization settles. Perhaps time is not something rushing past you, but something you move through, one region at a time, while other regions remain quietly present even when you are not looking at them. The thought does not insist on being believed. It simply offers itself as one way to imagine the unfolding of before, now, and after. Around the edges of the room, low shelves hold a series of narrow boxes arranged in a long arc. Each box bears a date on its front, not in numbers, but in small symbols, phases of the moon, positions of stars, shapes of leaves. You slide one box gently from its place and open it. Inside, you find a few simple objects: a dried flower, a scrap of fabric, a small pebble. Together, they suggest a day that once unfolded somewhere, though you will never know the full story. You return the box and choose another, then another. Each contains a slightly different arrangement of objects, as if each were a quiet museum of a single, forgotten moment. you begin to feel how many days remain present in traces, memories, keepsakes, impressions that linger. The past does not vanish completely. It becomes part of the structure that supports the present, like foundation stones hidden beneath the floor. On the far side of the room, an open doorway leads to a narrow balcony that overlooks a dim, starlit atrium. You step outside and rest your hands on the smooth stone railing. High above, a painted ceiling depicts a night sky, frozen at a particular arrangement of constellations. Far below, the floor carries another pattern, representing the same stars at another time. You stand between these two images, like a traveler between past and future, aware that both belong to a single, larger design. You notice that there is no ordinary clock here, no ticking hands or numbered dials. Instead, time is suggested through relationships, stars to stars, moments to moments, positions to positions. The library seems to invite you to consider that every instant might be part of a broader whole, like pages in a book, all existing at once, even if you can only read one page at a time. The idea brings not anxiety, but a curious, settling calm. As you turn back from the balcony, you notice a small table near the doorway, holding an hourglass. Its design is simple, the sand inside pale and fine. Yet this hourglass behaves differently from those you know. The sand is motionless, suspended mid-fall between the upper and lower bulbs. You tilt your head slightly, observing how each grain hangs in place, neither rising nor falling. It is as though you have stepped into a single frozen instant set apart for careful, quiet inspection. You reach out and gently touch the glass. Nothing changes. The grains remain suspended, the scene unwavering. Rather than feeling unsettling, the stillness comforts you. It reminds you that even in a life that often feels fast and fleeting, there are moments that seem to open wide, stretching beyond their measured length. A quiet conversation, a lingering sunset, a breath held in shared silence. In such moments, time feels less like a sequence and more like a space. You leave the hourglass where it stands and move back into the main chamber. As you cross the floor, you sense that level 5 is slowly guiding you toward another understanding, that your experience of time is both limited and expansive, bounded by memory and anticipation, yet connected to something broader and more mysterious. You are not required to decide whether time is a line, a circle, or a vast, timeless landscape. It is enough, for now, simply to feel how each possibility changes the way your thoughts drift and settle. On the opposite side of the room, you find another archway, this one framed by carvings of flowing lines that branch and merge like streams joining a river. As you step through, the lighting shifts again, becoming slightly brighter, though still soft and soothing. You have begun level 6, where attention turns from time itself to the patterns of cause and effect that seem to shape events within it. The shift into level 6 is gentle, almost imperceptible at first. The air feels slightly warmer here, as if the space has been shaped by movement rather than stillness. The hallway opens into a long gallery lined with wooden panels carved in flowing patterns. These carvings resemble branching pathways, each line connecting to the next in a series of gentle curves, like streams feeding into a broader river. You pause, letting your eyes follow the branching shapes as they guide your attention from one point to another with steady rhythm. Walking deeper into the gallery, you come across a set of tall frames arranged along the walls. Each frame holds a collection of small objects suspended inside transparent resin. The objects range from everyday items, buttons, leaves, pebbles, to more curious pieces, like fragments of broken pottery or the soft outline of a feather pressed flat. Each object appears linked to the next in a quiet chain of associations. The frames seem to whisper a simple truth. One thing leads softly into another, not through force, but through the gentle unfolding of events. In the center of the gallery stands a circular table divided into several sections. Each section contains a vignette carved from pale wood. One shows a raindrop falling into a pool, sending out expanding ripples. Another shows a seed resting beneath soil, its first fragile root beginning to emerge. A third depicts a candle flame leaning slightly from an unseen draft. These scenes have no words attached, yet each hints at a relationship between cause and outcome, motion and consequence. You move closer to the vignette of the raindrop. Even though the carving is still, it evokes a sense of unfolding motion. The moment captured, a single drop touching the surface, contains within it the shape of everything that follows. Rings widening, water stirring, reflections shifting. You realize how many events in life share this structure. A small action, barely noticed at the time, becomes the beginning of a long chain of changes that only become clear in hindsight. The next vignette, showing the seed beneath the soil, draws your attention with its quiet determination. You trace the outline of the tiny root with a finger. Its path is simple, yet it suggests an entire future. Leaves unfolding, branches forming, sunlight catching on the edges of growth. Nothing about the carving tries to force meaning upon you. Instead, it offers a calm and patient reminder that every outcome begins long before it becomes visible. The third vignette, the candle flame, flickers in the warm light of the gallery. Though carved from wood, the flame seems to sway subtly, as if acknowledging a presence you cannot see. You imagine a door opening somewhere outside the frame, a faint gust passing through, a shift in the air leading to a change in the flame's posture. These slight influences, almost too gentle to notice, shape the movement. You sense how many moments in life are guided not by grand forces, but by delicate currents of circumstance. As you step away from the table, the gallery widens into a quiet rotunda. Above you, the ceiling is painted with swirling patterns in soft tones of blue and gray. These shapes seem to drift rather than stay still, giving the impression of clouds slowly reshaping themselves. The floor mirrors the ceiling's design, though its shapes appear more settled, as if representing the grounding effects of outcomes that emerge from shifting possibilities. At the edge of the rotunda stands a tall cabinet of drawers. Each drawer is labeled with a small symbol: a wave, a leaf, a lantern, a turning wheel, a simple dot. You pull open the drawer marked with the dot. Inside, you find a single sheet of paper with a circular stain in one corner. No text accompanies it, yet it conveys a sense of beginning, a point from which something once spread outward. You return the sheet carefully and open the drawer marked with the wave. Inside lies a smooth piece of driftwood, curved gently as though shaped by years of tides. Its form reflects how persistent influences, repeated over time, leave traces on everything they touch. In the drawer marked with the lantern, you discover a shard of stained glass, warm in color and translucent. When you lift it toward the lamplight, the glass casts a soft glow across your hand. You sense how illumination works. Light meets an object, and the object shapes the light that continues onward. Influence flows through things, never passing untouched. The drawer bearing the wheel contains a small wooden cog with rounded teeth. As you turn it between your fingers, a soothing pattern of motion emerges. The cog suggests interconnectedness. When one part turns, another follows, each movement guiding the next. You return the cog to its drawer, noticing how the gallery gathers countless subtle examples of how events shape one another, not through strict determinism, but through gentle continuity. The final drawer, marked with the leaf, holds a dried leaf that remains surprisingly intact. Its veins form a delicate network, branching outward from a single stem. You study the structure for a moment, appreciating how every line supports another. Even in its stillness, the leaf conveys motion, the memory of growth, sunlight, wind, and time. You set it back with care and close the drawer softly. On the opposite side of the rotunda, a large doorway leads into a smaller chamber with a domed ceiling. The room contains a single sculpture, a spiral carved from pale stone. The spiral begins with a tight curve at the center and gradually widens as it reaches outward. Walking around the sculpture, you notice how each outer arc feels like a continuation of the inner one, yet subtly different. The entire form suggests that events unfold not in straight lines, but in patterns that expand gently over time. You sit for a moment on the bench beside the sculpture. The quiet of the chamber settles around you, offering a space to reflect without urgency. You consider how each moment of your journey through the library has followed from the last, not predetermined, yet naturally connected. The library does not tell you what cause and effect should mean. It simply shows how events, choices, and influences often move like the arcs of the spiral, expanding gently, repeating softly, shifting with calm precision. When you stand again, the air feels slightly warmer, as though acknowledging that the lesson of level 6 has settled into place. You return through the rotunda and step toward the hallway leading to the next region of the library. The lights dim slowly behind you, leaving a quiet sense of completion in their wake. The path ahead bends toward deeper questions, those of meaning, uncertainty, and the gradual unfolding of human thought. Level 6 fades gently into the distance, and the next stage waits in soft, welcoming silence. Level 7 begins with a quiet shift in atmosphere, noticeable not through sound, but through a gentle deepening of the air, as though the space itself has become more reflective. The hallway leading into this new area is narrow, lined with tall windows that do not show the outside world, but instead reveal soft, moving patterns of color. These patterns drift slowly, blending into one another like pigments carried by calm water. They offer no images, no scenes, only the suggestion of gradual change. As you walk along the windows, you sense that level 7 is a place where uncertainty is not a source of discomfort, but an invitation to slow the mind. The library here does not present clear explanations or structured sequences. Instead, it seems to ask a quieter question. What does it feel like to approach concepts whose outlines remain indistinct? The drifting colors along the windows seem to embody this question, offering forms that never fully settle, yet never feel chaotic. The hallway opens into a chamber shaped like a long ellipse, with curved walls that meet overhead in a smooth arch. In the center stands a low platform holding a single object, a sphere made from translucent stone, its interior threaded with faint lines of color. When the sphere catches the lamplight, the lines glow softly, revealing a shifting geometry that never appears the same from one angle to another. You step closer, watching the interior patterns move as your perspective changes. The sphere seems to represent ambiguity, not confusion, but the kind of ambiguity that accompanies complex ideas whose full meaning appears only when observed from multiple viewpoints. You slowly circle the platform, noticing how each position highlights a new path within the stone, as though the sphere reveals its structure only through movement. Nothing about it demands interpretation. It simply allows you to see how understanding can change through gentle shifts of attention. Beyond the sphere, the chamber extends into a series of alcoves carved into the curved wall. Each alcove contains a single object paired with a small plaque of polished wood. The plaques contain no text. Instead, each holds a simple engraved line that seems more symbolic than descriptive. The first alcove displays a folded parchment resting beneath a glass dome. The parchment remains sealed, its contents hidden. The engraved line on the plaque resembles a looping curve that begins boldly and fades toward its end. You stand before the parchment for a moment, sensing the quiet lesson it offers. Knowledge can exist even when inaccessible, and uncertainty is not the absence of meaning, but a form of distance between question and answer. You move on without opening the dome, accepting that the parchment is meant to remain closed. The next alcove contains an hourglass with unusually fine sand. The grains fall so slowly that the movement is almost imperceptible. The plaque below shows a straight line that bends slightly at one end, as though marking a subtle shift in direction. You find yourself watching the nearly still surface of the sand, realizing that uncertainty often unfolds in increments too small to notice in the moment. Only later, when enough grains have gathered, does the shape of change become visible. In the following alcove, a small brass instrument rests upon a velvet cushion. It resembles a compass, but instead of cardinal directions, its dial contains delicate arcs etched in pale gold. Within these arcs, the needle moves with slow, irregular pulses, never pointing in exactly the same direction twice. The plaque's engraving is a pair of parallel lines that never meet, hinting at paths that move alongside one another without converging. The instrument feels like a representation of choices that cannot be ranked or resolved, each option meaningful in its own quiet way. The chamber shifts as you continue. The ceiling arches higher, and the walls draw back to form a large circular room. In the center stands a structure resembling a tree carved from matte metal. Its branches spread outward in graceful arcs, each holding a set of hanging bells in different shapes. The bells are quiet, not silent, but resting, as though waiting for something more subtle than touch to awaken them. As you step closer, a faint draft passes through the room, and one bell produces a soft tone, gentle and wavering. The sound lingers for only a moment before fading completely. The bells evoke the nature of possibility, uncertain, delicate, and shaped by influences too light to trace. Each tone feels like an idea that appears unexpectedly, flickering briefly before dissolving. The room seems designed to help you feel the presence of things that emerge without clear origin, reminding you that not all understanding arrives through deliberate effort. Sometimes it comes as a quiet resonance, an intuitive shift that cannot be fully explained. On the far side of the circular room, a narrow passage leads into a smaller space with a low ceiling. The lighting here is softer, creating a dim, contemplative atmosphere. Along one wall runs a series of shelves filled with small clay tablets. Each tablet is blank, its surface smooth except for faint ridges that look like erased inscriptions. The tablets appear to have once carried writing, but whatever they held has faded beyond recognition. You slide your fingers carefully across one of the tablets. The warmth of the clay gives a sense of quiet continuity, as though the tablet still remembers what it once held. The erased surface suggests that knowledge can transform or even vanish without losing its significance. Some ideas remain with us, not because we recall them precisely, but because we sense the space they once occupied. Across from the shelves stands a narrow table supporting a single lamp with a shaded glass cover. The light it produces is unusually soft, casting a gentle gradient across the table. On the table rests a set of thin wooden strips arranged in parallel rows. Each strip is marked with shallow grooves that run in different directions. You realize that the grooves are not meant to be read, but noticed, like textures representing the different paths a thought can take as it moves through uncertainty. You stand before the table for a long moment, listening to the faint hum of the lamp. The quietness of the room encourages stillness rather than conclusions. You begin to understand level 7 not as a place of answers, but as a space dedicated to the experience of ambiguity itself. The kind that allows reflection to deepen without needing resolution. When you step back toward the circular chamber, the air feels subtly altered. The bells remain silent now, their tones absorbed into the room like echoes of unspoken thoughts. A wide doorway opposite the entrance begins to glow faintly, indicating the transition to level 8. You move toward it slowly, carrying with you the calm acceptance that uncertainty can be a companion rather than an obstacle. Level 7 fades behind you with quiet grace, leaving space for the deeper contemplations that await ahead. You pass through the glowing doorway and step into level 8, where the air feels even quieter, as though sound itself has slowed. The room is hexagonal, each wall lined with a tall, narrow shelf. At the center stands a circular platform with 3 small objects upon it: a ladder, a ring, and a stone block, all carved from smooth, pale wood and arranged with deliberate care. You move closer. The wooden ladder is finely made, its rungs evenly spaced, yet it has no base and no top. It simply stands there, unsupported, as though resting on an invisible floor and leaning against an invisible wall. A calm understanding rises within you. Some ways of justifying what we know feel like this ladder, each step resting on another with no final ground beneath. The climb never truly ends. Every answer leads gently to another question. Beside it lies the ring, a plain loop with no beginning and no end. When you pick it up, it feels pleasantly cool in your hand. You turn it slowly, noticing how no point can claim to be first. The ring suggests explanations that circle back upon themselves, where reasons quietly depend on the very thing they are meant to support. For a moment, you sense how thought can move in loops rather than straight lines. The stone block, placed next to the ring, feels different. Its surface is firm and steady, as though it has decided that no further questions are needed. The block hints at the starting points we sometimes accept without proof, the assumptions we stand on when the search for deeper justification must rest. None of the 3 objects is praised or rejected. They simply share the platform, showing different ways the mind tries to settle the question of how knowing begins. Around the walls, the narrow shelves hold rows of glass jars. Inside some, you see tiny scenes rendered in fine detail. A person watching the sky, another reading by lamplight, a traveler at a fork in the road. In others, there are only fragments: a door without a room, a road without a traveler, a key without a lock. Each jar feels like a belief caught at a particular moment, some complete and some unfinished. You take one jar from the shelf. Inside, a small figure stands beneath a leafy tree, looking up at its branches. The scene feels peaceful and convincing, yet as you look more closely, you notice that the tree has no roots. It rises from the ground as though placed there rather than grown. The belief appears solid at a glance, supported by experience, yet something beneath it is missing. You return the jar, sensing how certainty can rest on foundations thinner than they seem. From another shelf, you lift a jar holding only a painted sky. A pale disk like a sun hangs there, lighting an empty blue. You imagine someone who thinks the world looks only like this, bright and simple, because that is all they have ever known. As you study the jar, it becomes clear that knowing is not only about how things are, but about how wide a view we are able to hold at once. At the far side of the room, a shallow recess in the wall frames a large circular window. Instead of opening onto the outside world, it reveals a slowly turning pattern of lines and symbols. They repeat, shift, and return again, tracing rules that nearly form a complete design, yet always leave a small gap. You sense that this pattern represents any system of thought that tries to hold all truths within itself, capturing almost everything but never quite explaining its own frame. A low bench rests beneath the window. You sit and let your gaze soften, no longer trying to follow each symbol as it turns. The motion becomes a quiet rhythm, like slow breathing or distant waves. You feel the gentle comfort of recognizing limits. No structure of reasoning, however careful, can fully support itself from the inside. Instead of worry, this brings a light, settling relief, as though a long-held weight has finally been set down. To your right, a final doorway stands partly open, leading into a small side chamber. Inside, there's only a table and a single candle in a brass holder. The candle is unlit, but beside it lies a small box of matches. You approach and strike one, listening to the brief hiss, feeling the tiny heat on your fingertips. You touch the flame to the wick, and a soft light blooms into the room. In the candlelight, you notice a simple line carved into the table. It does not claim certainty, only suggests that perhaps knowing is less about owning an unshakable foundation and more about keeping a gentle, honest light in the midst of uncertainty. The flame does not reveal every corner, but it reveals enough for you to sit, breathe, and feel at ease. You remain by the candle for a while, watching the way its light moves softly over the grain of the wood. Every so often, the flame leans to one side and then returns, as though acknowledging invisible currents in the air. You realize that your journey through these levels has not removed doubt or built a final ladder to absolute truth. Instead, it has taught you to carry a small, steady clarity within the open space between questions and answers. When at last you rise and step back toward the hexagonal room, the candle's glow seems to follow you in memory, like a faint warmth held quietly in the chest. Level 8 does not close behind you. It simply grows still as you walk away, allowing its lessons to settle. Ahead, the corridor bends once more, leading you toward further levels where meaning, value, and existence will unfold with the same slow, soothing patience that has guided you this far. The corridor into level 9 curves gently downward, as though guiding you not deeper into the building, but deeper into reflection. The walls here are smooth and pale, illuminated by light that seems to come from nowhere in particular. There are no lamps, no windows, only a soft glow that follows your steps, dimming slightly when you pause and brightening when you continue forward. The air feels warm and completely still, like the interior of a quiet library long after closing. The hallway opens into a circular room, perfectly symmetrical, with a floor patterned in concentric rings of muted stone. At the center stands a low pedestal, holding a delicate glass lens the size of your hand. It rests within a brass frame shaped like an open eye. You move closer, noticing how the lens distorts the patterns on the floor beneath it, stretching the rings outward in some places and gathering them tightly in others. You lift the lens gently. Holding it before you, you watch how the world through its surface shifts shape. Nothing becomes unrecognizable, but everything appears subtly altered, as though the lens reveals the quiet distance between perception and reality. You sense that level 9 invites you to consider not whether appearances deceive, but how they filter the world, shaping understanding one delicate distortion at a time. Around the edges of the room stand 6 tall mirrors, each framed in dark wood. Their surfaces appear normal from a distance, but when you step before the first, you see that the reflection lags by a fraction of a moment. You raise your hand, and your reflection follows just after, like an echo made of light. The delay is slight, yet it gives the sensation that your reflection is thinking before it moves, considering each gesture with quiet deliberation. The next mirror does not show a delay, but its reflection subtly changes the lighting around your image. Shadows appear where none exist, and highlights shimmer softly across surfaces that remain still. This mirror suggests how expectations can illuminate or obscure without altering the object itself. You spend a moment watching the shifting light before moving on. The third mirror removes all color, presenting you in shades of gray. Without hues, the reflection becomes simpler, almost peaceful. Each contour of your face appears softened, as though the mirror offers a version of perception stripped of unnecessary detail. It does not feel false. It feels like a reminder that truth can sometimes appear more clearly when distractions are gently set aside. The fourth mirror shows a slightly distorted version of the room behind you, stretched along subtle curves. As you move, the background warps, bending lines of stone and shifting the shape of the reflections around you. This mirror seems to whisper that even the environment you rely on for grounding can shift in ways unnoticed, reminding you that context is always part of the truth you see. The fifth mirror surprises you. It shows not your full reflection, but fragments. Your hands, then your face, then the shape of your shoulders, appearing and disappearing as though the mirror organizes your image by its own logic. You sense no threat or confusion, only the reminder that perception often comes in pieces rather than in complete visions. The mind assembles coherence from fragments, stitching reality together through quiet, unseen work. The final mirror shows your reflection exactly as it is, unchanged and unaltered. Yet when you look into it, you feel a softness, as though the mirror carries no intention, offering neither distortion nor clarity. It reflects without comment, inviting you to rest in the simple experience of seeing without judgment. After the shifting illusions of the other mirrors, this stillness feels like a release. Beyond the circle of mirrors, a narrow doorway leads into a room shaped like a long rectangle. Inside, the walls are lined with cabinets that hold hundreds of thin wooden frames. Each frame contains a translucent sheet marked with faint circular diagrams, intersecting lines, and geometric shapes that resemble maps of unknown territories. You take one frame from a cabinet. When you hold it up to the light, the symbols become clearer, forming a pattern that seems to hover between meaning and mystery. You lift another frame and layer it atop the first. The shapes overlap, creating a new diagram with unexpected coherence. You realize that each sheet offers only part of an idea, yet when combined, they reveal relationships invisible when viewed alone. The room feels like a quiet metaphor for how truth often appears, not in isolated pieces, but in the ways those pieces meet, overlap, and illuminate one another. A long table runs through the center of the room. On it rests a shallow bowl filled with polished stones, each stone carved with a single line or arc. You pick one up and feel the smooth weight of it in your palm. When you place it on the table, the carved line aligns with markings already etched into the wood, forming the beginning of a larger pattern. You add a second stone, then a third, watching as the lines lengthen and intersect. The design grows not through instruction, but through slow, intuitive arrangement. As the pattern reveals itself, a sense of calm understanding settles over you. The room is not asking you to solve a puzzle or reach a conclusion. It is showing how clarity can arise from patient attention, how meaning unfolds through gentle placement rather than force. Eventually, you stop arranging the stones, not because the pattern is complete, but because the act itself has reached its quiet conclusion. At the far end of the room stands a tall wooden door painted in muted shades of blue. The colors blend in soft waves, fading at the edges as though dissolving into the air. When you approach, the door opens slowly, revealing a long, dim hallway leading toward level 10. The transition feels smooth and natural, as though level 9 has prepared your mind for the next step, one that explores not perception itself, but the frameworks that give perception its structure. You take a slow breath and step forward, carrying with you the gentle calm of mirrored reflections, layered diagrams, and quiet patterns unfolding like soft ripples at the edge of understanding. Level 10 begins at the end of a narrow hallway, where the light grows dimmer with each step. The air feels cooler here, not cold, but steady, like the temperature inside a stone chamber untouched by weather. The atmosphere carries a sense of quiet expectation, as though the space ahead is preparing to reveal something subtle and carefully measured. When you reach the end of the hallway, a wide archway opens into a spacious room lit by a soft, diffuse glow. The room is shaped like a vast square, divided by thin lines carved directly into the stone floor. These lines form a large grid, each square identical in size, stretching across the room like a silent diagram. Standing at the threshold, you feel the grid's presence, not as a restriction, but as a structure, something that gently organizes space without imposing meaning. You take a step inside, and your foot lands on one of the squares. The stone beneath feels smooth and evenly polished, as though it has been walked upon for centuries without wearing down. When you take another step, you notice that each square carries a faint symbol etched into its surface. These symbols are minimal, simple shapes like arcs, dots, and tiny intersecting lines. They do not form a language, but instead act as quiet indicators, suggesting that each part of the grid holds its own purpose, even if that purpose remains unspoken. At the center of the grid stands a tall pillar made from pale marble. Unlike the polished floor, the pillar carries natural imperfections, soft veins of color that run vertically through the stone, branching gently as they rise. At its top rests a small copper sphere, slightly tarnished yet smooth. The sphere reflects the room in a softened, distorted image, as though it compresses the space into a single, shimmering point. You approach the pillar and reach out to touch the sphere. It feels cool beneath your fingertips. When you rest your hand upon it, a faint vibration pulses through the metal, steady, rhythmic, almost like breathing. It is not mechanical, but seems instead to echo the subtle heartbeat of the room itself. You sense that the grid, the pillar, and the sphere belong to a single structure of thought, one that reveals how frameworks shape understanding. Beyond the pillar, the room widens into an attached chamber. Here, the floor rises into stepped platforms arranged in concentric rectangles. On each platform rests a series of flat stone tablets, carefully positioned in symmetrical rows. You pick one up. It is heavier than it looks, with tiny grooves forming a complex pattern on its surface. The pattern feels abstract at first, but as you tilt the tablet under the room's soft light, faint connections emerge, lines that hint at relationships between ideas without fully revealing their map. Setting the tablet down, you look across the platforms. Each row contains variations on this theme, structures that appear self-contained yet subtly relate to the shapes beside them. You begin to see that level 10 is not about individual ideas, but about the frameworks that contain them. The room seems to say that meaning arises not only from concepts themselves, but from the quiet architecture that supports them. In the far corner of the chamber stands a tall cabinet with open doors. Inside, shelves hold scrolls bound with silk cords. You take one scroll and unroll it carefully. The parchment contains diagrams drawn with delicate ink strokes, circles, arrows, overlapping shapes, all arranged with meticulous spacing. Some diagrams show branching paths, others depict enclosed loops. None of them carry labels. They serve not as explanations, but as invitations to observe how ideas relate within structured systems. You re-roll the scroll and return it to its shelf. As you do, you notice a small pedestal beside the cabinet. On it sits a glass container filled with clear water. Floating within the water is a single paper figure cut into the shape of a leaf. The leaf drifts slowly, turning first one way, then another, its path influenced by delicate currents invisible to the eye. The movement is subtle but continuous. You sense that this leaf represents how, even within a system, motion arises from forces too gentle to name. A narrow passage leads from the chamber to a quieter alcove. Inside, the lighting dims to a soft amber tone, and the stone walls curve inward, creating a sense of shelter. A single table sits at the center, holding an ink brush, a blank sheet of paper, and a bowl of black ink. The tools appear unused, untouched by time. You sense you are not meant to write a message, but to understand the invitation. Within any structure, there remains space for new marks, new forms of thought, new pathways toward meaning. You sit at the table for a moment, listening to the silence. The alcove has no windows and no openings besides the passage you entered through, yet the air feels light, as though the space is breathing with you. You rest your hand on the blank sheet, feeling the grain of the paper beneath your palm. The moment is not about creating, but about recognizing the calm possibility held within emptiness. When you rise from the table, you feel a quiet clarity. The journey through level 10 has not offered conclusions. Instead, it has shown that the structures beneath understanding, grids, diagrams, frameworks, do not confine thought, but gently support it, allowing ideas to grow, connect, and unfold at their own pace. You return through the chamber of tablets, past the vibrating copper sphere atop the marble pillar, and back to the edge of the vast grid. As you cross it, the soft glow that fills the room seems to recede slightly, as though it acknowledges your departure with a silent, respectful nod. At the far wall, a new doorway waits, framed by smooth stone. The door is slightly ajar, revealing a dim path leading onward. You step toward it with steady calm, carrying with you the quiet understanding that meaning is not something to be captured all at once, but something that grows in layers, shaped by the gentle structures that hold it in place. Level 11 begins at the end of a descending ramp. The slope is gentle, barely noticeable, yet you feel the slight shift in elevation in the quiet adjustments of your steps. The walls on either side are made of pale stone, streaked with long vertical lines that look almost like the grain of ancient wood. The air grows warmer as you move downward, carrying the faint scent of dust and worn parchment, as though this level preserves something long studied and carefully kept. At the bottom of the ramp, The corridor widens into a broad chamber shaped like a perfect oval. Soft golden light spreads from fixtures recessed into the ceiling, creating an atmosphere that feels warm without brightening too much. At the room's center stands a circular table holding a single object, a wooden box with no hinges or seams. Its surface is smooth, polished until it reflects the faintest glimmer of the surrounding light. You approach the box and rest your fingers on its surface. The wood is warm, almost as if it holds a memory of touch. When you lift the lid, though you saw no separation before, it opens effortlessly. Inside lies a small collection of objects: a pebble, a fragment of dried leaf, a strand of thread, a curved metal pin. None of them seem connected, yet they share a careful placement, as though gathered from different moments in time. You hold the pebble first. It is smooth, rounded by countless steps of erosion. It feels ancient, shaped not by a single event, but by a long sequence of small changes. As you turn it in your hand, you sense how identity is formed not from one moment, but from the quiet accumulation of many. You return the pebble to the box. Next, you lift the dried leaf fragment. Its edges crumble slightly at your touch, yet the central vein remains strong. The leaf seems to carry the memory of the tree it once belonged to, even though the tree itself is no longer present. You set the leaf down gently, recognizing the suggestion that continuity often persists in traces rather than intact forms. The strand of thread feels delicate, yet surprisingly resilient. When you pull it slightly, it gives but does not break, as though it remembers the tension of whatever fabric once held it. The metal pin, by contrast, is firm and unchanging, its shape preserved perfectly. Each object seems to represent a different way of persisting, a reminder that identity can bend, break, hold, or transform, yet remain itself in quiet ways. You close the box and step back. Around the chamber's perimeter stand 12 tall wooden pillars arranged in a ring. Each pillar has a faint line carved around its middle, as though marking a division between its upper and lower halves. Yet the wood grain flows uninterrupted across the line, suggesting that the division is symbolic rather than structural. As you walk around the ring, you notice that no two pillars are the same height. Some are tall, nearly reaching the ceiling. Others are shorter, hardly taller than your chest. Each pillar carries unique patterns in its grain: tight curls, broad waves, subtle shifts from light to dark. Standing among them, you feel as if you are moving through a forest of quiet continuities, each pillar a moment of existence shaped by time. Near the far wall, a series of stone steps leads to a raised platform. On the platform rests an arrangement of nested frames made from different materials: wood, metal, clay, and glass. The frames decrease in size as they rise, forming a stepped tower with a hollow center. You approach it slowly. When you look down through the aligned openings, the world beyond becomes layered into a single narrowing view. You shift your angle slightly, and the alignment changes. Each frame reveals a different shape, a different emphasis, altering the meaning of the space within. You realize this structure is not about confinement, but about perspective. Identity, too, is shaped by the frames through which experience is viewed: internal, external, past, present, each offering a different form without negating the others. To the right of the platform, a doorway leads into a narrow hall. Along one wall stretch a series of shallow niches, each holding a small clay tablet. The tablets are simple, unpainted, marked only with faint impressions that resemble fingerprints. You lift one tablet and feel the slight unevenness of its surface. The impression is shallow but clear, a reminder that even the subtlest touch leaves a mark, altering the shape of things in quiet, irreversible ways. As you place the tablet back, you notice a slow, rhythmic sound resonating through the hall. It is not mechanical, but organic, like the sound of a distant heartbeat or a quiet drum felt more than heard. Following the sound, you reach a rounded room at the end of the hall. The floor here is sand, smooth and unbroken except for a single circular track carved deeply into it. At the center stands a wooden armature holding a pendulum. The pendulum swings with serene, precise motion. Each arc traces a line in the sand, marking curves that overlap or diverge with each swing. Over time, the lines shift, layering patterns gently atop one another. None of the patterns is permanent. A new swing may smooth or reshape the earlier ones. Yet every trace remains part of the pendulum's quiet record, its memory inscribed through motion. You kneel by the sand and watch the pendulum draw its slow path. The lines reveal neither chaos nor perfection, but something between, a steady rhythm shaped by small variations. You sense that this room reflects how identity forms, not from rigid boundaries, but from repeated movement shaped by subtle influences. Each moment leaves a mark, yet no single mark defines the whole. Standing again, you feel a soft calm, as though level 11 has offered not answers, but a gentle acknowledgement. Identity is not fixed, nor entirely fluid, but a living continuity, shaped through layered impressions and shifting frames. A passageway opens to your left, leading toward the beginning of level 12. The corridor is dim, lit by small lamps spaced far apart, leaving pockets of shadow between them. The air cools slightly, signaling a transition into themes that move from continuity toward questions of reality, truth, and the nature of existence itself. You take a slow breath and step forward, letting level 11 settle behind you like a quiet chapter closing softly, ready for the next one to unfold. You follow the dim corridor into level 12, where the air feels cooler and the silence grows deeper, as if even the library's own thoughts have lowered their voice. The lamps along the walls are small and widely spaced, casting pools of light that do not quite touch each other. Between them lie stretches of soft shadow, not heavy or frightening, but gently uncertain, like unmarked pages waiting for words that have not yet been written. The corridor opens into a large circular hall whose ceiling disappears into darkness. The walls are lined with tall, narrow panels made of a material you cannot immediately define, somewhere between stone and glass. They appear solid, yet when you move, faint reflections drift across their surfaces like ripples on still water. At the center of the hall stands a low platform supporting a single object, a simple, unadorned chair. You walk toward the chair and notice that it is positioned facing one of the panels. The panel directly in front of it appears slightly brighter than the rest, holding a faint image that you cannot yet make out. You sit down. The chair is surprisingly comfortable, its wooden frame shaped to follow the natural curve of your back. As you settle into it, the panel ahead slowly clears, like mist lifting from a window, revealing the blurry outline of a familiar room. At first, you see only shapes: a table, a window, a shelf, a doorway. Then the details resolve into sharper focus. The room looks ordinary, perhaps like one you have known, yet you know with quiet certainty that it is only an image. The panel shows a world that feels almost real, but remains just beyond reach. You watch as the light in the image shifts gently, suggesting the passage of time. Nothing dramatic happens, yet the scene feels complete in its stillness. After a while, the image fades, and the panel returns to its soft, reflective calm. You rise from the chair and move to another panel. This one remains blank at first, showing only your reflection and the dim outline of the hall behind you. Then slowly, the reflection softens and is replaced by another scene, a path through a forest lit by scattered sunlight. You can almost hear the leaves moving, almost feel the cool air, yet you remain where you stand, untouched by the breeze that seems to stir only inside the image. You realize that level 12 is inviting you to feel the difference between appearance and presence, between what seems to be and what is. The panels do not lie. They simply show that perception can be convincing without being complete. You move from one panel to the next. Each reveals a different scene: an empty street at dusk, a quiet shoreline, a study filled with books. But always you remain in the hall, standing before an image that cannot quite cross the distance between representation and reality. At the far side of the hall, you find a niche carved into the wall. Inside, a single lantern rests on a small shelf. The lantern's glass is clouded, its metal frame worn, but the light inside burns steadily. Beside it lies a small, polished stone. When you pick up the stone and hold it close to the lantern, you notice that its surface reflects the flame with unusual clarity. The reflection is not a perfect copy. It trembles with each tiny movement of your hand. Still, the stone seems to remind you that even reflections can carry warmth and light, even if they are not the source. You return the stone to its place and walk toward the center of the hall again. This time you notice that the floor is not a simple circle, but a series of faintly marked concentric rings. Each ring is divided by lines that extend outward like spokes from a wheel. At the very center, where the chair stands, the markings are the most subtle, almost invisible. As you step outward along one of the spokes, the lines become slightly more pronounced, as though indicating degrees of distance from something quietly central. Near the outer edge of the hall, you discover a low table holding a series of masks carved from thin wood. Each mask is simple, yet their expressions differ in small ways. One appears slightly amused, another calm, another thoughtful, another weary. You lift one of them and place it gently in front of your face. The world looks almost the same, but the edges of your vision feel altered, as though your perspective has shifted just enough to notice how easily the sense of self can change with a slight adjustment. You remove the mask and set it back with the others. The hall does not suggest that any one expression is more true than another. Instead, it offers a quiet recognition. Identity, like perception, may include many layers, each lens revealing a different version of reality without fully defining it. The question of which layer is real becomes less important than the awareness that there are layers at all. On the opposite side of the hall, a doorway leads into a smaller room, almost entirely dark, except for a narrow beam of light falling from a small opening in the ceiling. Dust moves slowly through the beam, turning in the air like tiny drifting stars. At the center of the light stands a small pedestal holding a clear glass sphere, empty and perfectly still. When you step closer, your reflection appears faintly on its surface, mingling with the light and shadow around it. You realize that the sphere shows nothing on its own. It becomes meaningful only when light, environment, and observer meet. Level 12 seems to whisper that reality, too, may be partly shared, something that emerges not from a single source, but from the meeting of mind, world, and perception. The thought feels gentle rather than unsettling, as if uncertainty is not a threat, but a quiet, spacious invitation. You step back from the sphere and let your eyes adjust to the dimness. For a moment, you simply stand there, breathing slowly, feeling the soft rhythm of your own presence within the quiet room. There is no pressure to decide what is real and what is not. The library does not demand conclusions. It offers places where questions can be held without urgency, like stones resting at the bottom of a clear pool. When you return to the large circular hall, the panels along the walls have grown dim again, their images faded back into simple, reflective surfaces. The chair remains in the center, empty and still. You pause, acknowledging the space with a final calm glance, then turn toward the exit. A narrow doorway has appeared between two panels, its threshold lined with a faint glow. You walk toward it, feeling level 12 settle behind you like a soft, thoughtful silence. The lessons of appearance, reflection, and reality do not close like a finished chapter. They remain open, held gently in the background of your awareness as you step into the next corridor. Ahead, the path will lead toward themes of value, meaning, and the subtle weight of choice, all unfolding with the same slow, soothing patience that has carried you this far. Level 13 begins with a quiet change in atmosphere. The corridor leading toward it feels neither warmer nor colder, yet the air gains a certain stillness, as though the space is holding its breath. Soft lights glow from narrow sconces along the walls, casting long, gentle shadows that stretch ahead of your footsteps. The floor is smooth stone, gradually shifting in tone from pale gray to a muted copper hue, guiding you toward a place where decisions and values begin to take shape. The corridor opens into a broad chamber arranged like a circle, divided into pathways. Each path extends outward from a central platform, creating a star-shaped pattern on the floor. At the center, a low pedestal holds a single candle enclosed in clear glass. The flame burns steadily, though no draft touches it. You step closer and watch how the light reflects in the glass, forming multiple, overlapping glimmers. Something about the candle feels symbolic, not as a source of illumination, but as a small representation of responsibility. Its flame is gentle, yet steady enough to light the surrounding space. It burns neither hurriedly nor reluctantly. As you stand beside it, you sense that level 13 begins with the recognition that choices, even the quiet ones, carry a subtle glow that reaches farther than what first appears. Beyond the central platform, each radial path leads to a different alcove. You choose one at random and follow it, your footsteps echoing softly. The alcove holds a wooden stand supporting a balance scale crafted from brass. The pans are empty, perfectly level. You lift one gently, observing how easily balance gives way to the slightest shift in weight. This scale carries no judgment. It reflects only the delicate tension between actions and consequences. You return the pan to its resting place and step into the next alcove. Here, a tall mirror hangs on the wall, but it does not reflect your image. Instead, it shows faint silhouettes moving through a soft haze. The shapes do not resemble people, more like impressions of decision points, branching paths that fold into one another. The mirror suggests that many actions remain unseen while still influencing what follows. In the third alcove, you find a row of small stones arranged in a line along a low shelf. Each stone is marked with a single carved groove, though none of the grooves share the same direction. Some run straight, others arc gently, others intersect as though capturing the trace of a quiet but irreversible shift. You pick up one stone and feel its cool surface. The groove represents neither reward nor penalty, only motion. Something happened and a line remained. Returning to the central platform, you notice the candle flame flickering slightly, though no air moves. You watch the small tremor of light and sense that level 13 is not concerned with right or wrong in rigid forms. Instead, it invites you to consider how choices shape reality through subtle adjustments like a scale tipping, a reflection changing, a groove marking a surface. A narrow doorway leads from the chamber into a quieter room where the ceiling is lower, creating a sense of shelter. The walls here are lined with shelves holding small wooden tablets. Each tablet carries a simple drawing, a forked path, a rising arc, a descending curve, a circle closing in on itself. The drawings are not instructions, but reminders that decision-making often takes forms that resist neat categories. You lift one of the tablets, showing a branching line. The lines diverge gently, not with force, but with calm inevitability. Holding it, you feel the simple truth that decisions rarely present themselves as dramatic moments. Most appear quietly, shaped by countless small influences, giving rise to outcomes that follow their own patient unfolding. Toward the back of the room, an archway leads into a smaller chamber filled with soft, indirect light. In the center stands a wooden table holding 3 objects: a smooth pebble, a feather, and a tiny metal ring. You recognize these not as symbols of reward or burden, but as representations of differing weights that choices may carry. You pick up the pebble first. Its weight is modest but noticeable. Holding it, you sense how some decisions rest with a certain gravity, even when you do not fully understand their reach. The pebble's presence is steady, neither heavy nor light, simply reminding you that significance does not always reveal itself immediately. The feather feels different. It weighs almost nothing, barely more than the air around it. Some decisions feel like this: light, effortless, passing. Yet the feather drifts easily with the smallest motion, suggesting that even weightless moments can shift direction quickly and carry unexpected distance. The ring, small and cool, sits comfortably in your hand. It has no beginning or end, its shape continuous. Some choices echo this quality, actions that loop back into one's life, reappearing through cycles of experience and reflection. The ring reminds you that not everything moves in straight lines. You place the objects back on the table, understanding them not as lessons, but as quiet invitations to notice the subtleties of moral weight. Level 13 does not press you to judge. It simply asks you to sit with the gentle complexity of choice. When you return to the circular chamber, the candle still burns with the same steady flame, as though untouched by time. The radial paths now feel familiar, not as routes to different conclusions, but as varied ways of approaching the same central truth. Choices do not stand apart from the self. They shape it, thread by thread, light by light. A corridor opens on the far side of the chamber, leading toward level 14. The walls of this new passage are lined with faint markings, small arrows, tiny circles, soft gliding lines. They resemble diagrams of movement rather than instructions. The passage feels like a transition from moral weight toward questions of meaning, purpose, and the interpretive frameworks through which we understand our own actions. As you walk, the markings become slightly more elaborate, though still subtle. Some lines intersect, others diverge. The corridor seems to suggest that meaning is not found in isolation, but in the relationships between actions, contexts, and interpretations. Yet the tone remains gentle. There is no urgency, no demand for resolution, only a quiet sense that reflection deepens with each step. By the time you reach the far end of the passage, the markings fade back into smooth stone. A soft glow emanates from the room ahead. Level 14 waits there, ready to unfold the next layer of this slow, contemplative journey, one that turns toward the nature of belief, value, and how we navigate the space between uncertainty and understanding. You take a slow breath and step forward. Level 14 opens into a wide chamber where the ceiling arches gracefully overhead, forming a dome lined with soft, diffused light. The glow seems to shift in quiet gradients, never brightening or dimming too quickly, but moving with the same slow rhythm that has carried you through all the previous levels. The floor is patterned with sweeping curves carved into pale stone, meeting at subtle intersections that resemble the threads of an intricate tapestry. At the center of the chamber stands a circular table carved from polished slate. Its surface is marked with shallow grooves forming delicate symbols, some curved, some straight, some looping into gentle spirals. The symbols do not resemble language, yet you sense they represent forms of meaning, faint echoes of how people make sense of their experiences. You rest your hand on the table and feel the temperature of the stone, cool but not cold, as though holding a memory of clarity. Around the table are 4 tall stands holding thin sheets of translucent material. Each sheet is etched with faint shapes that appear only when you adjust your angle. The first sheet displays layered circles that overlap in a way suggesting ideas that repeat, echo, or return after long intervals. You look at the pattern and feel the soft recognition that beliefs often cycle, revisiting earlier understandings with new context. The second sheet shows a branching pattern, tightly clustered at the bottom and spreading widely at the top. The branches do not follow a single direction, but curve gently outward, forming a quiet web of possibilities. This design suggests that values develop gradually, branching in response to new insights or experiences rather than emerging all at once. The third sheet holds a single continuous line that loops around itself in a smooth curve before extending outward. Its movement feels steady and patient, neither rushed nor hesitant. You trace its shape with your eyes and understand that some beliefs grow not through branching paths, but through long, continuous refinement. The final sheet is nearly blank, etched only with a faint diagonal stroke. It is the simplest of the 4, carrying no elaborate structure. As you look at it, you sense that level 14 acknowledges the importance of simplicity as well. Those rare beliefs that remain quiet but stable, guiding without explanation. You leave the stands behind and walk toward a recessed alcove where a stone bench sits beneath a narrow window. The window does not reveal an exterior landscape. Instead, it opens to a softly glowing surface that shifts gently like a distant horizon, blurred by morning mist. As you sit, the alcove feels like a pause in the larger chamber, a place for reflection rather than discovery. Beside the bench stands a tall metal frame holding a series of thin metal rods suspended at different angles. When a faint current of air moves through the alcove, the rods vibrate softly, producing tones that rise and fall with delicate irregularity. Each tone feels like a quiet expression, neither fully formed nor entirely fleeting. You listen, realizing that interpretation, too, has its own resonance, shaped by the subtle movements of attention and perspective. Further along the wall, you find a small wooden pedestal supporting a closed book. Its cover is smooth and unmarked, offering no title or hint of contents. You lift it gently, surprised at how light it feels. When you attempt to open it, you discover that its pages have been sealed together, each one fused seamlessly to the next. The book is not meant to be read. It exists as a symbol, reminding you that some questions cannot be unlocked through effort or analysis. They remain quietly closed, offering presence rather than explanation. You set the book back on the pedestal and continue toward a narrow passageway that curves behind the dome. The passage leads into a smaller chamber containing a large disc made of brushed metal. It rests flat on the floor, its surface divided into sections by a network of fine lines. You step onto the disc cautiously. As you shift your weight, the disc tilts almost imperceptibly, adjusting to your movement. The tilt is subtle, but it conveys a quiet truth. Meaning shifts gently depending on where you stand. The chamber seems designed to show that interpretation is dynamic, shaped not only by what is observed, but by the position from which it is viewed. You stand still for a moment, feeling the disc settle into perfect balance beneath your feet. Beyond the chamber of the tilting disc, another doorway leads into a long hallway lined with lanterns enclosed in frosted glass. Their light is soft, creating overlapping halos along the floor. As you walk, the lanterns respond to your presence, brightening slightly when you pass and dimming once you move on. It feels as though the hallway acknowledges your steps, recognizing that meaning arises through interaction rather than existing independently. Halfway down the corridor, a series of niches appear along the wall. Each niche contains a small object placed on a low stone shelf. In the first niche, you find a single piece of charcoal resting beside a clean white cloth. The contrast suggests that understanding sometimes emerges from the act of marking and erasing, creating shapes and removing them, leaving traces of both action and restraint. In the next niche lies a small bowl filled with clear water. The surface remains perfectly still. When you lean closer, the faintest reflection of your face appears, softened and distorted. The reflection feels neither entirely accurate nor entirely false, meaning the bowl seems to say, is often shaped through gentle distortions, reflections of the world filtered through your own presence. A third niche holds a brass key with no matching lock. The key feels warm in your hand, as though it has been held many times before. You turn it over, noticing its simple shape. The absence of a lock suggests that some insights are not meant to open specific answers, but to remind you of possibility, a quiet door that exists only when needed. At the end of the hallway, a tall archway leads into the final space of level 14. Here, the room narrows into a small, circular sanctuary lit by a single lantern suspended from the ceiling. Beneath it stands a low table with a shallow bowl filled with fine sand. A wooden stylus rests beside it. You kneel before the table and gently draw a line through the sand. The sand shifts smoothly, forming a clean curve. You draw another line, then another, watching the patterns unfold. None of them feel permanent. With a single pass of your hand, they can be erased entirely. Yet for the brief moment they exist, they feel meaningful. Soft expressions of intention and reflection. In this quiet act, you understand the nature of level 14. Value and belief are not fixed shapes, but living impressions, forming and dissolving with gentle purpose. They do not demand certainty. They invite awareness. You rise slowly, leaving the patterns undisturbed. A small doorway opens ahead, signaling the transition to the next stage of your journey, where meaning deepens into questions of existence, purpose, and quiet cosmic scale. You take a final breath in the soft glow of level 14, then step forward. Level 15 begins with a quiet chamber carved from pale stone that reflects light in a soft, muted glow. The space feels larger than the earlier levels, though nothing about it is imposing. Instead, it carries a sense of gentle openness, as if inviting you to let your thoughts stretch outward without urgency. The ceiling slopes upward in a smooth curve, and the air is still, holding a subtle coolness that clears the mind. In the center of the chamber stands a wide circular pool filled with water so still it resembles glass. The surface reflects the ceiling in a soft blur, as though the image never quite resolves into sharp detail. You step closer and lean slightly forward. Your reflection appears faintly, not distorted but softened, as though the water acknowledges your presence without insisting on precision. Around the pool, 4 stone pillars rise from the floor, each carved with simple geometric forms. One pillar displays a sequence of circles, each one slightly larger than the last. Another bears a vertical line intersected at regular intervals by shorter horizontal marks. The third shows a spiral widening slowly outward. The fourth carries a single, unbroken curve that gently shifts direction, never repeating itself. These shapes feel familiar, echoing ideas from earlier levels, yet level 15 carries a deeper sense of distance, as though these patterns reflect questions about existence itself. You rest your hand on the first pillar's sequence of circles and sense the quiet implication. Lives expand and contract in cycles, sometimes clearly defined, sometimes blending softly into one another. You move next to the pillar marked with the intersecting lines. The repeated intervals evoke a quiet rhythm. moments of reflection spaced evenly across the length of a life, not by rule, but by the gentle unfolding of experience. The spiral on a third pillar feels more dynamic, yet still calm. It suggests exploration without chaos, movement toward understanding that remains patient and unforced. Finally, your eyes rest on the unbroken curve of the fourth pillar. It moves with no abrupt change, no sharp turn, no clear destination. Its quiet message seems to be that existence does not always follow a strict pattern. Sometimes it is simply the movement itself that matters. A slow unfolding rather than a defined goal. Behind the pillars, a narrow walkway leads to a raised platform. The platform holds a single object, a round stone disc engraved with a faint radial pattern. Each ray extends outward from the center, yet none follow a perfectly straight path. The lines bend gently, suggesting that understanding spreads not through rigid certainty, but through flexible awareness, expanding in soft arcs. You lift the disc carefully. It feels balanced, its weight steady in your hands. This is not a symbol of decision or action, but of perspective. The quiet realization that the way you look at the world shapes what the world appears to be. You return the disc to its resting place and step back. A corridor extends from the far side of the chamber, its walls lined with narrow shelves. On each shelf lies a single object encased in clear glass: a feather, a broken twig, a smooth pebble, a folded scrap of cloth. None carry labels. None offer explanation. They seem to represent moments of existence preserved gently, without interpretation. You pause before the pebble. Its surface is speckled with small patches of darker mineral. The pebble is unremarkable, yet its presence feels calm. It suggests that existence does not need grandeur to matter. Simple forms, briefly held in awareness, carry their own quiet meaning. Farther along, you examine the folded cloth. The fabric is plain and soft, creased as though once held or worn. It offers no story, no history, just the delicate memory of use. Existence often feels like that, layers of experience folded into simple shapes that remain without needing to be explained. The corridor narrows, guiding you toward a chamber bathed in soft amber light. This space feels warmer, though still subdued. At its center stands a low platform holding a tall glass cylinder filled with translucent grains of sand. The grains fall slowly from the upper chamber to the lower, forming a small shifting mound. The flow is steady, unhurried, creating a soft rustling sound like distant rain. Time feels different here, not a force pressing forward, but a quiet presence marking gentle transitions. You watch the sand gather into tiny ridges and settle into smooth evenness. Level 15 does not present time as urgency, but as continual movement, a background rhythm that shapes experience without demanding attention. Next to the cylinder rests a small wooden frame holding a translucent panel. When you tilt it, faint shadows drift across its surface. They resemble passing clouds more than solid shapes, appearing briefly before dissolving into the background. These shadows feel like fleeting thoughts, soft impressions that touch the mind lightly before moving on. A doorway leads out of the chamber into a dim passage that bends to the right. The floor here is covered with a fine, pale dust that muffles your steps, creating a sense of silence that deepens as you walk. Along the walls, small alcoves hold candles, each one burning steadily inside its own glass enclosure. Their flames sway subtly, as if responding to a breath too faint to feel. You pause at one alcove and observe the flame. Its shape rises and narrows before softening at the tip, creating a quiet sense of continuity. The candle does not illuminate far, yet its small circle of light feels complete. It conveys that existence does not require vast brightness to be meaningful. Sometimes a single steady glow is enough. The passage widens into a larger chamber where the ceiling is dotted with tiny embedded points of light. They resemble stars scattered across a muted sky, though their pattern does not match any constellation. The lights vary gently in brightness, creating a subtle shimmering effect, like distant signals rising and falling in slow rhythm. Here the air feels more open, as though inviting contemplation of larger scales. Level 16 begins not with symbols or objects, but with space, quiet, patient, unobtrusive. You stand in the center and gaze upward. The scattered lights feel neither infinite nor finite. They simply exist, present but ungraspable. A slow realization settles in. Level 16 turns toward the scale of the universe, not through grandeur, but through stillness. It suggests that existence unfolds across vast distances and subtle boundaries, and yet within that expanse, individual moments retain their quiet importance. Ahead, a narrow stone bridge curves toward a softly lit doorway. You take a breath, steady and unhurried, then walk forward, ready to enter the deeper questions that Level 16 will reveal. Crossing the curved stone bridge, you approach the doorway that marks the full entrance into Level 16. The opening is framed by two tall pillars carved with faint horizontal lines, spaced at varying intervals. These markings feel neither decorative nor instructional. Instead, they resemble quiet indicators of distance, subtle reminders that scale can shift slowly, expanding far beyond immediate perception. As you step through the doorway, the ceiling rises dramatically, yet the light remains soft enough to dissolve any sense of grandeur. The chamber is vast but muted, its colors gentle, its contours smooth. There are no sharp edges here. Every surface feels as though shaped by long, patient time. The light comes from above, diffused through a canopy of pale stone that glows without revealing its source. The floor stretches out in a broad circle, inlaid with concentric patterns that ripple outward from a central point. Each ring differs slightly in texture, some smooth, others faintly ridged, suggesting layers of scale. You walk slowly across the rings, sensing the shift beneath your feet. With each step, the patterns feel less like measurements and more like quiet reminders of how existence expands in widening spheres. Near the center of the chamber lies a raised platform supporting a single bronze sphere. The sphere is perfectly smooth, reflecting light in a soft, blurred halo. You approach it and place your hand lightly on its surface. It is cool, yet it warms subtly at your touch, as though recognizing the presence of another mind. The sphere carries no symbols, no instructions. It simply exists, a calm anchor in a broad and open space. You lift the sphere with both hands. Despite its size, it feels lighter than expected, as though it contains more emptiness than substance. Holding it, you sense the quiet hint that existence often feels heavier in thought than in form. The sphere encourages reflection, not through weight, but through stillness. After a moment, you gently return it to the platform. From the central circle, several wide paths branch outward, each lined with low stone markers. The markers are simple and identical, spaced evenly, with no inscription. They resemble silent milestones, acknowledging movement without defining its direction. You choose one path gently, allowing your steps to follow its gradual curve. As you walk, the air becomes subtly cooler, and a soft hum seems to rise from the stone beneath your feet. It is not a sound in the usual sense, but a faint vibration, like distant resonance carried through the floor. The hum is steady, calming, almost meditative. It gives the impression of the universe breathing in slow rhythm, an unhurried pulse underlying everything. The path leads to an alcove carved directly into the stone wall. Inside the alcove stands a tall glass cylinder filled with shimmering threads of light. The threads drift slowly upward, pause, then descend in soft, irregular waves. They resemble abstract patterns of motion, shifting like delicate currents of thought. You watch them for a while, noticing how their movements never repeat exactly. Level 16 seems to suggest that vast scales are not defined by symmetry, but by quiet variation. You return to the main chamber and follow another branching path. This one leads to a tall arch framing a view into a narrow room. Inside, a long table stretches from one end to the other. Upon it rests a series of smooth stone discs, each slightly larger than the one before. The discs are arranged in a gentle gradient, reflecting the notion of gradual expansion. You lift the smallest disc. It is faintly warm and fits comfortably in your palm. Setting the small disc down, you place your hand on the largest. It is cool, its surface broad and calming. The change in scale feels meaningful, yet neither disc carries more significance than the other. Level 16 conveys that perspective shifts gently, not through hierarchy, but through widening understanding. Continuing through the chamber, you encounter a tall, slender column carved with spiraling lines that rise from the base to the top. The spirals are shallow but intricate, creating a sense of steady ascent. The column does not impose itself. It stands quietly, offering a subtle metaphor for growth that unfolds without urgency. You trail your fingers along the spirals, feeling how they rise with consistent patience. Nearby, A narrow wooden bench sits beside a wall carved with a sweeping curve. You sit for a moment, letting the stillness settle. The chamber holds a silence that feels vast yet comforting. It is not empty. It is expansive, like a quiet horizon where thoughts can unfold without resistance. A faint glimmer catches your attention. At the far end of the chamber, a doorway leads into a smaller space illuminated by soft blue light. You enter and find a shallow basin filled with dark water. The water reflects tiny points of light embedded in the ceiling above, creating the impression of a tranquil night sky mirrored in perfect stillness. You kneel beside the basin, observing the reflection. The lights above shift subtly, though you cannot see the source of their motion. The effect is gentle and mesmerizing. The reflected sky feels impossibly deep, yet the surface remains calm. The water suggests that perception can hold vastness without disturbance. The universe does not overwhelm when met with quiet attention. A small metal ladle rests beside the basin. You dip it gently into the water and lift it, watching droplets fall slowly back into the pool. Each droplet creates soft ripples that spread outward before fading into stillness. You observe how movement and calm coexist, how the smallest action carries across a larger field, yet settles naturally without conflict. After returning the ladle to its place, you stand and take in the room one last time. The reflection still shimmers softly, holding the appearance of distant stars. You sense that level 16 is not teaching a lesson, but offering a quiet experience of scale. It invites you to recognize that existence moves gently across vast distances, and that the mind can rest within that space without fear. When you leave the chamber, the main hall feels familiar again. The subtle hum continues beneath your feet, rising and falling in the same unhurried rhythm. Ahead, another corridor opens, a smooth passage lit by soft amber lamps. The air grows slightly warmer, hinting that you are approaching the transition to a new tier of understanding. You walk forward, carrying the calm expanse of level 16 with you, ready to step into the next chamber where the journey will continue unfolding with the same patient clarity.